Thank you, David, for this great presentation and very useful steps in how to shape our thinking around risk. And now I would like to talk about how to move from thinking to actions and to make sure that these actions are actually effective and they serve the purpose. And along the way, along the presentation, I would also be very glad to share my experience from the field of development and humanitarian work. And after presentation, of course, or if any burning questions during, would be happy to answer your questions and hear your comments. So let's move on. How to move from thinking to effective actions. Of course, thinking is just the start. There is something more that is needed, and I'm talking purely from a perspective of development and humanitarian field. For us to translate right thinking into right actions, risk-informed programming is instrumental, and I'm going to talk about this risk-informed. I think it has become a buzzword recently, risk-informed. We are talking a lot about risk-informed, but quite often we actually mean the different things, or in any case, we are not on the same page quite often what risk-informed entails. I think that for risk-informed programming for development and humanitarian field, or risk-informed programming could be achieved by creating some sort of conducive environment around different type of interventions we have. It could be project, program, it could be portfolio of activities. We can think of network of different organizations acting together. So that risk-informed can be achieved when that environment is in place. Environment that would help organizations, project, programs, networks, associations, foundations, different actors actually, to identify those as David said, uncertainties that matter, upside and downside of risks, respond to them effectively and report them accurately. Now, we will talk about how to, some tips, how to create that conducive environment. But first of all, let us understand what do we actually mean by risk-informed. As I said, quite often understanding is slightly different. I think that the whole narrative around risk-informed came predominantly from disaster risk management field, where slowly but surely there was growing understanding that disaster risk has to be factored in development and humanitarian programming. So that was the first sort of flagging of the importance of risk-informed, but it implied that disaster risk-informed sort of connotation. Nevertheless, I think for successful risk management for development and humanitarian field, there is a need for that more integrated perspective on risk management. And by that, it does not necessarily mean only disaster-related risk, but actually also, as David said, all those uncertainties that matter to us. Yeah, and this integrated perspective is becoming the key for the successful risk-informed, truly risk-informed programming. I hope you would agree with me that quite often when we are talking about development and humanitarian field and risk management in this field, risk management functions reside within those organizations quite often in audit control departments. I was following Tour de Table to see where our colleagues are coming from, and most of us seems to come from compliance, from audits, from financial departments, from control departments, and this is understandable because this is very much the case among these organizations, right? That's where from the urgency and importance of risk management quite often comes from. So financial compliance, quite often security, or very important security-related risk, but there is a whole universe besides that, the whole universe of different other type of risks that are still need to be taken into consideration factored in programming, in conceptualizing, in designing, in implementing, in M&E of different programming. And this is critical, that integrated perspective. What David said as risks, risk management as a early warning system, as a radar that would capture all those risks that are really important for your organization. And that I'm trying to emphasize the importance of this integrated risk management. And one of the points we asked Jez also to think about the possibility of engaging programming colleagues from your organization, because they too have a share in risk management, right? So that integrated risk management perspective in terms of how actually to approach that. And here, I think enterprise risk management as a conceptual model is very much instrumental for risk-informed programming. What does that mean? Yeah? The enterprise risk management approach suggesting, in a very simple terms, look around, identify your risks, of course, having a system in place, having instruments in place, analyze your risk, and factor them into your programming. From that perspective, from that conceptual model, so all your interventions, project, program, again, portfolio, anything, is an enterprise, or we can call it a system, yeah, because it has its own integrity, its own compounding parts, relationships within them, and the boundaries. So that's your system. And to identify the risks that matter for your system, this is the tricky part of it. I want to talk about fostering risk-informed programming, but first, let me emphasize one point here. When we are talking about development, and this is the biggest difference, to me, fundamental difference between development and humanitarian fields from private sector. For private sector, the focus of risk attention is inside the organization. For development and humanitarian organization, the focus of risk management is outside the organization for the benefit of their stakeholders, their beneficiaries. So that implies that outside perspective. So the question is, whose risks matter, whose risks come as a priority, would also be carefully weighted. Now, thinking about fostering risk-informed programming, as we said, any type of intervention, look at it as a system. Yeah? So how to define the boundaries of your system? That's where risk appetite comes in as an instrument. So with your risk appetite, you define for yourself, and you tell to your stakeholders, okay, these are the boundaries of my system. This is what I consider no-go. This is what I try to explore. So these are the boundaries around my intervention or my organization, and I'm operating within these boundaries. So in that sense, the importance of risk appetite is absolutely critical. I have seen the cases when risk appetite or the risk appetite statement is being considered as ticking the box exercise. We have to, so we come up with some nice words, lots of buzzwords usually within few sentences. But it should be not only that, it should be something much more. It should be informative for your organization and your staff, your stakeholders, but also for outsiders. In terms of risk information flow, I was very happy actually to hear comments from Mari, who said that we are moving away from this likelihood impact terminology, and we are focusing on those risks that are important. So we take it and we manage it. I would also try to avoid this terminology, and actually, I think that risk information flow is defined by your risk management system, which we should guarantee right information at the right time to right audience. And for that, I think there are three critical considerations: moving away from likelihood and impact. Likelihood to be translated as urgency. How urgent is the risk for the organization, right? Because that would help you to decide how urgent your response should be. Important, so considering the whole impact, what is the importance? And very important here, I use the same word as uncertainty, but here it's in slightly different way as David proposed. Uncertainty in terms of being explicit. How much do you know about urgency and how much do you know about importance? Because we can use urgency and importance, the Eisenhower famous matrix for decision making, right? But in some cases, we have very little certainty or very little knowledge about urgency and importance. In other cases, our knowledge is more. So that level of uncertainty in understanding urgency and importance of any risk is also a very critical factor before making decision how to respond to your risk, and even earlier, how to prioritize those risks. Yeah. So here I wanted to emphasize this. This is not to say that likelihood and impact assessment are irrelevant, not at all. All depends on the complexity of your organization, on the complexity of your interventions. In some cases, it is highly justified. Even translating your impact into financial terms is highly impact. In some other cases, it is less. But the whole idea of this likelihood impact analysis is to understand how urgent, how important, how sure am I about all this, and then move on. Yeah. So this is also that bridge between technicalities of risk management, but also those all the rest of the world, so to say, on how to approach risk management. I would like to emphasize the importance of the risk response imperative, because why on earth we would be doing, we put in all the efforts for risk assessment, identifying, assessing risk, why? But the whole idea is to decide we need to respond, then we respond. But response means adequate resources, means in right time resources in order to address those critical risks. Yeah, and so risk management is not a thinking process only for the whole organization, but there should be resources attached in order to take the actual steps to respond to risks. Let's move on. A few words about the importance of shaping risk culture and skills. So that responsibility around risk management, obviously, comes with accountability. Another way around, accountability comes with responsibility, right? You cannot hold anyone accountable within the organization if there are no responsibilities attached, if there are no resources allocated. So that delegation of authority around risk-related decision-making across the whole organization is absolutely critical. Of course, if you remember earlier, I mentioned risk information flow, so delegation of authorities, but if you have risk information flow sufficiently tailored within your organization, then you have escalation system, you can elevate to the attention to the right people when there is a need and all of that. But delegation of authority should be fundamental, starting point. This is to say that, let me jump to the third point and then to regularity. This is to say that basically, everyone is a risk manager. Everyone in the organization is a risk manager. The question is how good we are at that. Some are more skilled than the others. It could be okay in certain cases, but it's a big luxury not to pay attention to the skills that are necessary for risk management. It's a big luxury. The downside of that is too high. Excuse me. And another additional important consideration for shaping a very mature and very successful risk culture is the regularity in addressing risks. It shouldn't be once in a while fun exercise or a boring exercise. This should be a regular process, because basically this is something we are doing every second moment in our lives, either in our individual lives or holding our responsibility within our organizations. We are thinking, what if? And then what if something negative? What if something positive? So that thinking process is there, of course, as Homo sapiens, but this thinking, more structured and formalized thinking process should also be happening within the organizations, within different interventions, project, program, portfolio, etc. And the regularity should match, again, the complexity of the process itself. Yeah? In some cases, regularity might require weekly, daily, hourly, depends on the situation, right? Monthly, in other cases, even less. But there should be a meaningful, balanced regularity based on the complexity of the intervention. Few words about risk reporting, because we have heard that this subject or this area is interesting for you. And I was thinking, okay, risk reporting versus risk reporting, what are we talking about here? Let me explain. From professional risk managers, risk reporting would look like a risk register, heat map, right? Maybe some narrative around that. That's one thing. But for us, knowing the specifics of our organization's information around risk management must be part of our regular reporting, progress reporting. It could be annual report, it could be report to the board. There was a very interesting question about how to encourage this risk thinking at the board level. So the question is actually here, risk report as a technical thing, that's one aspect of risk reporting. Another aspect is how you bring risk-related information in your regular reporting to give a sense of confidence to your stakeholders that you actually take risk management seriously. You identify your risk, you know how to deal with that, and you put effort. All that needs to be factored in your reporting. When risk management system in your organization is well developed, well, in a sense, also matching, again, complexity of your organization, then this risk reporting is becoming a natural output. Yeah, when the skills are there, when the culture is conducive, all of that. Just a few tips in terms of what actually to take into consideration when you are thinking of your reporting that need to include risk information. Yeah? So what kind of risk information, what should be there? All depends on who is your audience. When you are reporting to your board, it's one thing. And of course, you are not going usually with 100 pages report. It should be something very concise, to the point, right? And here too, you need to bring to the attention of board your most critical risks, but also give confidence that you are sufficiently strong as an organization to manage the whole landscape of the risk you are facing. So the audience would define already the depth of information and the type of information you need to communicate. One thing is the board. Another thing, when you communicate to your donors, right? Then the whole reporting should have a much different focus, and then you might go very much into details, what has been done, of course, the normal, regular donor reporting, narrative, financial, all of that. And here too, what is your role here? To explain what has been done, but also to give confidence that you are managing all the risks that you are facing. And this would require probably much more detailed analytics in your progress report, in your financial report, with regards to the risks you are facing. Reporting to your stakeholders, and different stakeholders would have different interests, right? Different role and mandate within your big program, for instance. So then you would need to choose who needs what kind of information. But then the question is, do we need to have so many different risks? Again, yes and no, depends on what is important for your organization. How do you want to share your information about risks? In some cases, you might need different reporting, and you do different reporting just simply because it's your compliance and you are required to. So here you have a chance to factor risk thinking, risk information in your risk reporting. So identify audience, think about what they need to know don't overburden them. Also, I think very important to be explicit about risk, describe them sufficiently, saying risk of corruption, for instance, so what, but explaining what exactly, where, when, and how you have taken your efforts, how much you have invested, and how to manage those risks. That would give the flavor, and that would give the depth of information that is required from your side to be sufficiently accountable, from the side of the reader to have sufficient confidence in your capacities, your skills, and also to take final decisions. So what, yeah? It is also very important, I think, to explain what next. So that means, okay, we have identified the risk, we have invested in management of the risk, and then what? Do we intend to keep monitoring? Do we consider it closed? That is also important, so that it's not hanging somewhere there in the air, but it gives also a very clear picture. Is it completed now, or we still? So you can expect next time to hear more about this. And of course, quite often, risk-related information has to deal with disclosure, non-disclosure issues. This is not to say that it's about classifying some information. I don't think this should be the case in our field. And for many organizations, their host countries have information acts that requires absolute explicit sharing of information. It's not about that. It's about finding the right moment to disclose information, not to create sensitivities, not to create or put additional fuel in already existing conflicts outside your interventions among potential stakeholders who are involved in the program. Think about conflict areas, think about competing interests of different stakeholders. So this deciding on non-disclosure is mainly about deciding when, not about go or no-go, but about actually when to disclose risk-related information. I try to be very, very quick and to cover what I consider most important for this presentation. With this, I would like to thank you, and back to you, Shazin, for any questions if there are.